Howdy, and welcome to episode 20 of T-Shirts and Shawls. I'm Karen, and today is Thursday, February 9th, 2017. And if you have been watching this podcast, you'll notice that my hair is even lighter. You can still see some purple, but it's definitely more kind of blonde, gray-ish, like a silvery gray color. So I usually get my hair cut every 5 weeks, and so that is when I scheduled to get the purple, basically get my hair repurpled. Today is week 4. I guess yesterday was 4 weeks, so next week is when I have my appointment, and I have no idea what one more week of fading is going to look like, but I have to admit it kind of looks neat like this, but definitely not kind of what I was going for with the purple. So if I keep using the purple, I think 4 weeks might be the most that I can stretch it, because it's kind of getting to the point where I'm not as happy with it, so we'll kind of see what happens in the next week. I'd hate to have to go. I mean, I don't love going to get my hair cut and colored, so I like being able to maybe do both of those things at the same time. But if I need to like go get my hair repurpled every 3 to 4 weeks and then go back and get it cut every 5 weeks, I guess I will do that. So we'll kind of see what happens. But yeah, definitely if you go back 2 episodes, so 4 weeks ago, from right after I got it done, a very different color now. But anyway, I've got quite a few things that I want to share with you today, so we'll go ahead and jump right in. For today's shirt, I am wearing a shirt that has the 2 main characters from the TV show Supernatural on it. So Sam and Dean Winchester. And I don't know if I've talked about Supernatural before. It is one of my fandoms. Just not as, I guess, as big of a fandom for me as Doctor Who or Harry Potter, so I probably don't talk about Supernatural very much. But it is a show that my husband and I watch, and I can't remember if we started watching back in the first season when it was airing, or if the first season had finished and we watched it and then started watching the second season. But we started watching it from pretty early on. And it's now in the 11th season. I don't actually remember, but it's up there. It's been around for quite a few years. And if you're not familiar with the show, the really brief explanation is it's these 2 brothers, Sam and Dean Winchester, who are hunters, and they hunt things that are supernatural monsters, basically. Kind of protecting the United States from these creatures, and they travel all over the place, and mostly pretend to be FBI and investigate and eventually kill the monsters. There is a whole lot more to that. The show kind of started off as a Monster of the Week type of show, and then it developed these really large overarching stories. And a lot of things with angels and demons and God and Lucifer, and just a whole big, huge universe that goes with it. And I don't want to do any big spoilers in case you haven't watched it and you are wanting to watch it, but I'll just say Sam and Dean have each died multiple times and have, in one way or another, been brought back to life. And in some ways it's good because then the show continues, but in other ways it kind of takes a little bit away from the tension of the show, because even when Sam and Dean are in trouble and you think, oh gosh, there's no way out, or when one of them dies and you think, well, that's it, he's dead, that's really not it. And so you kind of lose some of that tension and that possibility that maybe this time they would actually stay dead. And I'm kind of at the point where I'm still enjoying this show. We're still watching and enjoying, but I think it's probably time for the show to be done. And I hate to say that because I really like having my weekly dose of Sam and Dean. And they are still moving forward with stories that are interesting. But I don't know. It just kind of feels like, how much longer can this go on? So we'll see. We're still continuing to watch it. It's still, yes, there have been some episodes that have been kind of, but I think that happens for any show, especially any long-running show. So we will still continue to watch unless something just really goes downhill. And I will say that, yes, Sam and Dean, it seems like they're, the tension about, what might happen to them isn't there. But I will say that the show does not shy away from killing off other characters. There have been some much beloved characters who have been killed off and who have stayed killed off, who have stayed dead. So there's not to say that there isn't any tension or loss felt in the show. It definitely has that. But, it has been going on for a long time, and it's just kind of a question of how much longer can this really continue. But we still keep watching. Speaking of kind of long-running shows, the other long-running show that my husband and I are still watching is Grey's Anatomy. And that is a show that I think has jumped the shark multiple times. And yet we still continue to watch. And I think that's because there are some characters on there that we still kind of care about, and we still want to know what happens to them. But gosh, there have been some times where I just really want to give up on that show. But I noticed that, so we record the shows that we usually watch, and then sometimes we watch them on the night they air, sometimes we watch them the next night, or whenever we have a chance. And I noticed with Grey's Anatomy, that's a show that we generally watch the night that it airs, or very soon after. So even though it is a show that we sometimes think, why are we still watching this? It is one that we watch almost right away. And I think that's kind of the way that we watch shows, by recording them. That helps us to see if there are any shows that we maybe are losing interest in. So, for example, we stopped watching Once Upon a Time last year. I guess it was probably about this time last year. Because we noticed that we had like 6 episodes that were stacked up on the DVR that we hadn't watched because we kept choosing to watch other stuff and not watch that. And we realized that, we have all these episodes that we haven't watched and we're not choosing to watch them. Maybe that's a sign that this is not a show we should continue with. And so we just deleted those episodes from the DVR and we stopped the recording. Although I will say that I've gone back and I guess that second half of last year, when it popped up on Netflix, I went ahead and watched it. Just kind of a few days where I was looking for something to watch, I went ahead and watched it. And it was okay. I mean, maybe when the next season pops up on Netflix, maybe I'll give it a watch at some point. But that is a show that we gave up recording. Anyway, kind of interesting that just wearing this Supernatural shirt led to all of that. But I don't have a what I'm reading / watching section in this episode because I really don't have much new to share there. So I guess this can kind of go into that area for this episode. For today's shawl, maybe you recognize the pattern. This is one of those patterns that it seems like everybody has made one, and if you have not made one, you really should. This is the Color Affection shawl. So I will take it off and show you how it looks. So basically, this is a shawl that you pick 3 colors. And you start with this color. It uses short rows, and then you add in the second color, and then eventually you add in the third color, which is what you finish with. And this is one of those shawls that just went viral. Like I said, everybody was knitting it. It's called Color Affection, and some people were calling it things like Color Infection because it was something that so many people were making. But I knit this one in 2013, so it's been around for a few years. And this is a pattern that I've been thinking about making again at some point, because part of the fun of it is picking out the 3 colors that you're going to make. And I think that this shawl is the thing that kind of started off. Now you see tons of shawls that are kind of stripy shawls. And I think this is kind of the shawl that kicked off that trend, which still seems to be a trend that is going on if you check the new patterns that show up on Ravelry. And I think, like I said, part of the fun is picking out the colors. So in picking out the colors for this one, like I said, I knit it back in 2013. 2013 was when we moved back to Texas. So if you either don't remember or you haven't watched previous episodes, I grew up in Texas and then went to graduate school at Purdue, so up in Indiana. And then after I decided to leave academia, we decided to move back to Texas. And so we moved back at the beginning of 2013, and in fact, this week is kind of our anniversary of moving back to Texas. So we have been in this house and back in Texas for 4 years, which is kind of crazy, because there are still things that we thought that we would do to the house when we moved in, plans that we had for it, that we still haven't done 4 years later. So we probably should get on that, but anyway. So 4 years ago, I moved back to Texas, and one of my friends from high school, she still lives back in our hometown. Still lives, I say, but she actually moved away for a while and then moved back. So she lives back in our hometown, and we wanted to get together, and she told me about DFW Fiberfest. And we decided to meet up there for the day and go to the vendor hall. And this was the last year that DFW Fiberfest was in Grapevine. The Fiberfest has expanded each year and gotten bigger, and so they basically outgrew Grapevine and moved to the Irving Convention Center, which is where they have it now. So that year we went up to Grapevine, we met, and we spent the day in the vendor hall. And usually when I go to a fiber festival, I know some people actually go pick out patterns and then say, I'm going to go buy yarn for these patterns, and they try to stick to their list. That's not the way I shop at Fiber Festival. I just go, and if something catches my eye, then I buy it and I worry about the pattern later. But this time I knew that I wanted to knit Color Affection. And so even though I still bought, stuff here and there, that was my main goal. I'm going to get my 3 colors of yarn for Color Affection. And I had heard of Madeline Tosh yarn, and I had knit with Mad Tosh before. But in moving back to Texas, one of the things that I was excited about is that Mad Tosh is dyed in Fort Worth. And at that time, there was actually a shop in Fort Worth, the Mad Tosh shop, which closed just a little over a year ago. Mad Tosh is still dyeing yarn, just the actual independent yarn shop is no longer there. Anyway, so Mad Tosh had a booth at DFW Fiberfest, and I decided that's the yarn I want to use. I'm going to use something from Mad Tosh to do my Color Affection. And so we went to their booth, my friends and I, and we spent quite a bit of time in that booth. I finally decided on the Tosh Merino Light. Pretty sure, let me double check my Ravelry page. Yeah, the Tosh Merino Light, which is fingering weight, 100% merino. That was the base that I decided I wanted to use. And so I just started pulling out, colors and putting them together. And it's easy to find a pairing, 2 colors that go together. When you start adding in a 3rd color, that's when things start to get a little trickier. And I remember that I had finally decided on 3 colors, and they were in the pink family. Because although blue is my absolute favorite color, there are times when when I kind of have another color that I really love, and at that time it was pink. Now, if you can't guess, it's purple. But pink was the color that I was in love with back then, and so I picked out pinks, basically. And I started looking at it, and my friend and I looked at it, and it didn't feel quite right to me. So I put the pinks back and kind of started all over in looking at the different colors. And I finally decided on this blue-green, basically, and then a darker kind of blue-green, and then a gray. So if you're interested in the actual names, this blue is button jar blue. The darker blue-green is, and I'm looking at my notes, is kelp. And then the gray is steamer trunk, which I think is a great color name. So finally decided on those colors and got them. And DFW Fiber Fest is in April, the beginning of April. And it looks like I didn't wait too long to have this sitting around in my stash. I started this shawl on May 8th, 2013, and finished it May 27th. So it was something that really got my attention, and I wanted to work on it. So looking at my my notes, it said that it was a bit monotonous, but it was fun to add in and change colors. I can definitely see why people like this shawl so much. So like I said, it was something that was fun to do, but again, picking out the colors is really the most fun part, I think. And so maybe at some point I will knit another one. Just a little kind of ending side note here. When the next year at DFW Fiber Fest, I took 6 classes. I did full student load, which, by the way, I don't recommend because that's just so much information. I think it would have been better if I had taken 5 classes and then had one section kind of free, because my brain was just mush by that last class. I really didn't get much out of the last class. So if I were to do that again, I would do 5 classes. And then also that would leave time to go to the vendor hall, because that was something else. There wasn't a lot of time to spend in the vendor hall because I was in classes the whole time. But I did make some time in the vendor hall. And one of the days I wore Color Affection. And I remember one of the vendors, and I do remember who it was, but I don't want to say that. So one of the vendors stopped me and complimented me on my Color Affection. And she said, "Yours is one of the best ones that I've seen. I really, really like your color combination. I have seen so many Color Affections this weekend that just look terrible. That the colors are just do not go together well at all." I was like, wow. I mean, nice compliment for me, but ooh, that's kind of not very nice to say about some of the other Color Affections that were running around. So yeah, I mean, I think color combinations are definitely a personal choice. I mean, some of you may be looking at this and thinking, oh, that's not what I would have picked. Yeah, so little bit of fun with combining colors, and maybe there are some that don't quite meet my own personal color preferences, but that's okay. If it's color preference that the person who did that really likes, then that's the most important thing. But I really like my Color Affection, and I actually have not been wearing it very much. And now that I'm wearing it here on the podcast, I'm really liking the way that it drapes and wraps around. So I should definitely put it in my rotation of things to wear. For the past 2 weeks, I have been focusing really strongly on the projects that I've been knitting for my book, and so I don't have a lot of other information about what I've been knitting, but so quickly show you. I did do a tiny bit on my Heroes of Yarnia scarf. I think that I don't remember if I had done the arrows on the last podcast episode, but it may have only been this chart that I did. Maybe it was also the arrows. So not a whole lot of progress on that. The next chart that I knit is a big 30-row chart that has another figure on it. So down here was a dragon. So I've got a figure coming up on the next one. And I just need to take some time to sit down and do it. Once I get the book project kind of squared away, I'm going to focus more on that. But so not much to report on there. And then the other non-book related project I'm working on is my Elizabeth shawl, which is the shawl I'm doing for the knit along for the podcast. And this is my progress on it. And I have to admit something. I'm not happy with it. This is unblocked. I mean, I'm kind of stretching it a tiny bit to show you, but I'm really not. Mostly I'm just straightening. So this is unblocked. This fabric is super airy. And I know some of that is the lace, obviously. The yarn overs are going to be airy. But even the part that are knit stitches, just, they're super see-through. And I don't like that. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I know some people really do like the very, very lacy, very airy types of things. But for me, I don't personally enjoy knitting something so loose like this, and I don't really love the look of it, especially when I think after I block it, it's probably going to get stretched out even more. I like my knit stitches, so anytime they're stockinette, to be very, very neatly formed V's that are nice in a row and in a line, and I'm just not getting that with this project. And there's nothing wrong with the pattern. The pattern is great. I am enjoying the pattern. And there's nothing wrong with the yarn. So the pattern, the Elizabeth Shawl by D. O'Keefe, and the yarn is from Fiber Spates. It is scrumptious lace, something like that. I will put it in the show notes. So there's nothing wrong with the pattern, nothing wrong with the yarn. I think the problem, and nothing wrong with the pattern plus yarn. I think they do go well together. I think the problem is that my needles are too big. So I am using size 4 needles, and I think that it's just, for me, it is creating a fabric that is too big. So I'm not going to do it on the podcast because since it's lace, I want to do it very gently. I'm going to rip out what I have and start over on smaller needles. Well, that may mean that I may or may not finish this shawl in time for this quarter's knit along. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But I think that I will be much happier with the project if I do it on smaller needles and have the stitches be a little tighter together, especially before blocking. So this is the kind of quick reminder about the Q1 knit along for this podcast. If you are participating, then I hope you'll pop into the group and post a progress photo of the shawl that you are making so far. If you don't know what the theme is, it is any shawl that has been in your queue or favorites for at least a year. And if you don't have any shawl that meets those requirements, then it is any shawl that was published at least a year ago. Basically to kind of get some love for some things that have been around for a while, because I don't know about you, but I get shiny new object syndrome. You know, I see the next new thing and I want to do that, even though there are other things that I got excited about before, and I would still be excited about if I weren't distracted by shiny new object. So I hope that you will join us in the Ravelry group for the podcast and for that knit along. And I've already given away one prize. And I am sure, well, there will definitely be at least one more prize, randomly drawn from the finished objects thread for the knit along. And by the way, I'm saying knit along, but crochet along will work too. If you want to crochet a shawl, definitely do that. So there will be at least one more prize drawing, maybe another random prize, because we have until the end of March. So it's each quarter the knit along goes. So this one started January 1st and will end March 31st. So we still have plenty of time in this quarter's knit along. So I hope that you will join us if you haven't already. And if you are joining in, go to the Ravelry group and post a progress photo. Love to see what you're working on. What I'm dyeing, basically lots of yarn for the yarn club. The first shipment goes out next week, so I have finished dyeing for that shipment. There is one skein that still needs to be reskeined. I dyed it yesterday, so that will be reskeined today, and then the first month will be done, besides putting all the packages together. And I am working on months 2 and 3 right now, and then after that I will do month 4. The reason why I want to get kind of ahead in my dyeing is that I mentioned DFW Fiber Fest. That is in April. So I am going to be doing a lot of prep for dyeing for Fiber Fest, and because that is April, I think it's 7th through 9th. Need to completely double check the dates. I'm pretty sure it's April 7th through 9th. And the shipment goes out, the Yarn Club shipments go out on the 15th of each month. I want to make sure that, especially for that month's shipment, that I am not basically really stressed out trying to dye it and to get it done. So I want to make sure that I have the Yarn Club stuff done, so that way I can then focus on Fiber Fest and not be stressed out about the Yarn Club, because to be honest, the Yarn Club, you guys who are in it, you are my priority. You've already paid for this, or you're paying for it with installment payments. So you are my priority. You come first. But I also need to make sure I have yarn for Fiber Fest. So I'm getting ahead on that, so then I can focus on Fiber Fest. So for DFW Fiber Fest, I am working especially on the self-striping yarn. So I have a couple of new colorways that will be showing up there. But in the, this kind of is what I finished knitting section. I finished a sample sock. This is one of my original colorways. So this is Cadbury Castle, which is a purple and golden brown color. So there you go. And this is, I think this may have been the second self-striping colorway that I dyed. But I never got around to doing a sample sock for it. So I finally did the sample sock and finished that. And if you like this colorway, there is at least one skein currently available in the online shop. So if you want this for yourself, or actually want to knit it for yourself, then run to the shop and grab that skein. And then, so that's an old colorway, but still a goodie. I still really like it. And then I'm working on some new colorways. And one of them I still can't reveal yet. I think I mentioned last time, it's a colorway that I did specifically for the new book that Cece Allman, so it's called Coffee with Cece, the second edition, or the second volume, I guess. I dyed a colorway for her book, and she is currently taking pre-orders for the book, and then the book will be released next month. And when the book is released and then the colorway is revealed, then I will both show you guys the colorway as well as have that colorway available for you to buy. And then I'm working, and then that also will be available at DFW Fiber Fest. And then I'm working on 2 other colors that that will be available at DFW Fiber Fest. One of them may be, the one I'm about to show you, may be available earlier. And then the other color, which I'm not going to show you quite yet because it is still in its big long skein form. Oh, I just gave you a little preview. Still in its long skein form. I haven't reskeined it, and so it's hard to show it off when it's in that format. That is going to be a DFW Fiber Fest exclusive colorway, so something that is only going to be available at DFW Fiber Fest. But I will show that to you probably a little closer to Fiber Fest. Anyway, so this is a colorway that I just really wanted something kind of cheerful, and so I decided to create a rainbow, but I did more of a pastel type of rainbow. So here is what I have knit of the samples so far. So, and I started at the pink, and I decided to do kind of a darker pink because I really like pink and wanted that to be kind of one of the focal colors. And then go through the rainbow and then back around to pink. So this is a 6-stripe colorway, and I haven't named it yet, so I need to do that, write up the little story that goes with it, and then I do have more skeins available, so I will probably get that in the online shop as soon as I sit down and come up with a colorway name. So look for that potentially soon. And then I will have that available at DFW Fiber Fest. I'm going to be mentioning DFW Fiberfest quite a bit between now and April. Because April is going to be here before I know it. I mean, since we're February 9th today, and it's April 9th is actually the last day of DFW Fiberfest. Now we're 2 months away, and I just kind of got a little panic feeling right then. I really need to get busy on that. So anyway, you'll probably hear me talk about that quite a bit, because it is, one, my favorite Fiberfest, two, my local Fiberfest, and I'm really proud to be a vendor there. And I love getting to see you guys if you are able to make it. So if you do come to DFW Fiberfest and you watch the podcast, let me know that you're a podcast viewer. Anyway, okay. Dyeing, I think that's pretty much it. I'm working on those self-striping mostly, and then I will have my other bases that I'm also working on and listing in the shop as I get some of those done. So last episode, I told you about the shawl that I released. Got a little bit of a design trying to spoil you right now. So I told you about the shawl that I just released, La Belle Dame Sans Mercy, so the beautiful woman without mercy. And that is currently available on Ravelry. I ordered print copies of the pattern, and they are scheduled to actually arrive today. So those will be listed in the online shop if you want a print copy. And then the print copy also comes with the electronic copy. There will be a coupon code on the pattern itself that you can go to Ravelry and get the electronic version. So hopefully the print copies will be available in the next couple of days. And so right now my focus is on the book. And I'm really happy to say that out of the 9 projects I have planned for the book, I have completed 8 of them. I really have gone into like hyper focus on this book project the past couple of weeks. So I thought that I would talk a little bit about the book projects. The actual theme for the book, I am not going to tell you here in this podcast episode. I am going to reveal that in my newsletter that goes out every other week. The next one goes out next Tuesday. So next week on Tuesday, which is February 14th. That newsletter, I will tell you the actual theme of the book. So if you are not yet a subscriber to the newsletter, make sure you subscribe before then, so you can find out what the theme is. And to subscribe, I have subscribe boxes like all over all of my websites. So if you go to T-Shirts and Shawls or Roundtable Yarns or Karen Dunn Designs, any of those, and those are all .com, any of those websites, you will find a sign-up box for the newsletter. Or even on my Ravelry profile, my designer profile, I have a link to sign up. So I will tell you the actual name of the book and the theme behind it in that newsletter. But I will tell you a little bit about the projects, kind of the process that I've been using to work on this book. And there are 2 projects that I will actually show you on this episode. So with that in mind, this is a project that I came up with the idea for over a year ago. I don't remember exactly when the idea popped into my head, but it has been at least a year, because I remember thinking that it would be really great if I could release it in mid-February. The reason being, you will understand a little bit better once you get the newsletter and see the actual theme. And so originally I actually wanted to be releasing it about this time. That's not happening, obviously. And I don't want to wait another full year to release it. So my goal is to release it this summer, basically in time for Houston Fiberfest, which is toward the end of June. Anyway, so this has been something that I've been working on for a while. And I really liked the idea, and I really got excited about it, but then I just kind of got busy. working especially on the yarn stuff, and a lot of editing projects that were on my desk, and I didn't really sit down and plan out this project. You know, I had the basics in mind, but specifically, you know, how many projects there were going to be, what they were going to be named, and what they were each going to look like, and then actually, you know, writing down the drafts. I didn't do that until I think it was probably August when I started nailing down some of the details. So the whole time I was worried that so I read Elizabeth Gilbert's book Big Magic, and one of the things she talks about is basically inspiration, you know, coming through and inspiring someone, and if that person kind of ignored inspiration or didn't move forward with the project, then inspiration would kind of move on and take that idea to someone else. And that actually kind of scared me a little bit when I read the book, because I hadn't really been working on this project. I knew I wanted to do it. I was really excited about it, but I hadn't, you know, taken those steps to really move forward on it. And so, you know, every now and then I would talk to inspiration and say, I still am planning on doing this. Please don't take this idea away. Please, you know, don't go give it to someone else. I really want to do this. And so that kind of also pushed me into taking some steps to actually kind of prove to inspiration that it was worth sticking around and waiting for me to work on this project. So anyway, so I finally sat down and planned out specifically, okay, now I know there are going to be 9 projects, and I will go ahead and tell you 8 of those projects are cowls, and 1 of them is a shawl. So mostly it is a book of cowls. So I sat down, I wanted to do kind of some different cowl constructions, which perhaps didn't work out quite as different and as broad as I had originally thought it might, for various reasons. But anyway, so I sat down, thought about the different ways that cowls could be constructed, looked at my theme, looked at the various characters that each of the patterns was going to represent and kind of what that meant, and looked through tons and tons of stitch dictionaries to get inspired for which specific patterns would go with which character and which cowl, and finally sat down and planned all of those things out. And then I created this big piece of paper that I have a grid on, that I have the names of all the patterns as well as which yarn, as I'm using all round table yarns, so I dyed each color specifically for the pattern. So with the pattern name, and then the kind of the step in the process across the top. So has the yarn been dyed? Has the pattern been drafted? Has the sample been knit? And then after knitting the sample, going back to the draft of the pattern and kind of finalizing, putting in all the details. And for a long time, there were only a couple of check marks on there, but the list has gotten filled in, and only 1, I guess technically 2 check marks remain. So the project that I'm currently working on, I have sat down and formally written out the pattern rather than just doing a quick draft. So I'll just need to go back in and, you know, fill out things like the final measurements and stuff when I'm done. Anyway, so check marks, yay! But I think what happened is I got really excited. I got into it, and then I started with the first project. And the first project was one that just took a lot of time. And that's the one that I'm actually going to show you. And this is knit in a bright yellow, so I have no idea. Hopefully on the camera it won't get washed out too much in the light. So this is my Damsel colorway, so a very, very bright yellow colorway. My Gawain base, which is a fingering weight that has a really tight twist, and so it makes the stitch definition really pop out, so you can see these cables. You can see the cables. They are definitely showing up really nicely. That's a result of the yarn. So these cables, I will just say, I don't want to dissuade you from potentially knitting this project when the book does come out, but I will say that these took a long time and kind of a pain. In almost every row there was a cable. I mean, every other row, because there were rest rows. Almost every other row there was a cable crossing. So there was just a lot of cabling to be done with this, and this took me. I think it took me like at least a month, maybe 2 months, just to finish this one cowl. It's not huge even. So it took me a long time to get through with this. And for some reason I had it in my head that I had to finish this one before I could move on to the next one, that I couldn't, start working on the next one and then kind of come back to this one. So I kept plodding forward with this one, and that just put things even more behind. I mean, not really behind, because I never officially said I'm going to have it, done by this date. But in my head, for what I wanted, that put it behind. So I kept going, finally finished this one, and then started the second one. The second one I played around, I'm going to look at my list to make sure that was the second one that I worked on. I did this one, and then I did that one. Okay, so either the second or third one. I played around with some short rows to do some shaping on the cowl, so it's not just a straight around type of cowl. So I did some short rows on that one, and that was fun. I enjoyed doing that, and that one went really quickly. And then I did one, I'll say that it's a very tall cowl, so one that really kind of scrunches up around your neck. And that one, even for kind of as much knitting as was involved, it went fairly quickly. There were some sections that took a little longer, but I moved through that one pretty quickly. And then I got to the fourth project, and that one I decided I wanted to do an I-cord cast on and bind off. And I've done an I-cord bind off before, but I'd never done the cast on, so I had to learn that. And then I did some tutorial videos for it as well. But man, the I-cord cast on takes a long time. It looks really cool, and it's great when it's done, but that took a while. But I finally got that cast on, and there was a little problem where I didn't actually finish the cast on all in one sitting. And so I put it aside for a while and came back to it. I think it was like a week later, because I started working on something else. Actually, I think that was when I was trying to finish the green shawl. So I was focusing on that, and I put the I-cord cast on aside. And when I picked it back up, I couldn't remember exactly how to get going. Like I made, instead of having, some stitches on each needle, I had put them all on one, so that none of them would fall off. And I had to remember, like, how many stitches should be on this needle and where am I going? And I think I got started wrong, and it looked off, and I had to rip back and try to figure out how to start an I-cord cast on in the middle of it after I'd put it down for a while. And I almost got to the point where I was going to give up and just rip it all out and start over. But I didn't. I persevered, and I was able to get it to look okay and finish the cast on, and that cowl went pretty quickly once I got going on it. And then I got to the fifth one. And the fifth one, I had planned on doing a flat construction, so you knit it flat and then putting buttons on it, so that way when you put it around your neck you can button it and create a cowl that way. And I realized as I was working on it that it wasn't working flat. It just didn't feel right. I didn't really like the way that it was a cabled pattern. I didn't really like the way that the cables were going. And so I decided to kind of put that aside for a little bit and think about how I might want to do that construction. See, I learned from that first yellow project that I didn't have to completely finish one before I moved on to the next. So I put that one aside and picked up the next one, and I kind of zipped through that next one. And got that one off the needles pretty fast, and went back to the other one that I had planned to knit flat, and I decided to knit it in the round, and I was much happier with the way that one turned out. And then I got, so that was 5 and 6, and then I got to project 7. That one gave me some problems, which I actually told you guys about last time on the podcast episode, where I decreased too much, and then when I finished and tried to get it over my head, it was basically like a crown. It wouldn't go all the way over my head, and I ended up actually having to rip that out completely and start over on that one. And so that one took a little time because of that, but I did finish it and move on. And then I got to project number 8. And this one is one that is kind of the main character in the inspiration poem. And so I wanted it to be, it needed to be an important one. And the idea here was that I wanted it to be a cowl that started off closer to the neck, but actually grew out. So you could put it around your shoulders if you really wanted to. I mean, you can still wear it, just around your neck. But if you wanted to, it was wide enough at the bottom to actually put around your shoulders, almost like a really short, not quite a poncho, but anyway, so it would go over your shoulders. So I'm knitting it. I actually finished that this past weekend. My in-laws were here for a visit, and so I just spent a lot of time knitting while they were here. And so I'm knitting, and I get to the bind off, and bind offs I have always run into problems with being too tight. I finally found a bind off that I really like that usually works really well. It's called Lucy's Modified Conventional Bind Off, and I actually have a tutorial video that explains how to do that if you are interested in looking at that bind off. But that's not the bind off that I did for this project. I decided to bind off purlwise. Because I actually really like the way a purlwise bind off looks. I think it creates a really nice finished edge. And then when you bind off purlwise, because of the way purl stitches are formed, they are a little bit looser than the knit stitches. So if you bind off purlwise, it generally is at least a little bit looser than if you're just binding off the traditional conventional bind off knitwise. Well, even though I did the purlwise bind off, it was too tight. And I could, as I was binding off, I could tell. I tried to, kind of stretch the bind off, and I could tell it was tight. But I kept going. I kept going with the bind off because I was excited. I wanted to be done. Oh, I should have listened to myself, because when that was bound off, finally, and since I wanted it to go over my shoulders, there are a lot of stitches on the needles there. So I finally did the bind off, went into the bathroom so I could have a mirror, and tried it on. And it went over my head, no problem. That wasn't the issue. It totally did not come even close to stretching out over my shoulders. It would definitely be something that just stayed around your neck, which, like I said, you can wear it that way, and it looked fine that way, but it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't the idea in my head. And I sat there for a long time staring into that mirror, trying to convince myself that what I had was okay. The fact that it didn't quite meet my expectations was okay. I could deal with it this way. I didn't need to go take out the bind off and redo it to make it looser. It would be fine the way it was. But I knew that I was lying to myself. Completely lying to myself, and that was not what I wanted. And I honestly thought, you know what? I have another skein of yarn in this color. I'm just going to go wind that skein, or maybe even I have enough of what I have left. I'll weigh it. And I'm just going to start from scratch and knit this all over again. That's how much I did not want to basically undo the bind off, because I knew that would be a lot of work. But I told myself, don't be silly. You can do this. You haven't woven in the ends yet, so, you just have to go through and unpick the bind off and put all the stitches back on the needle. I'll just start by saying it was worth it in the end. But oh my gosh, that is something that was not fun at all, especially binding off purlwise. I was having a hard time seeing like where one stitch was pat, because when you bind off, you know, you knit one, knit two, and then you pass one stitch over. And with the purlwise, you do the same thing, except you're doing it by purling. And I couldn't see the stitch that was passed over. I kept kind of picking up the wrong leg to get the stitch back on the needle. And so I was basically, you know, going stitch by stitch, pulling it out and trying to catch it on my needle. I eventually grabbed a crochet hook, and that worked a little bit better. But I didn't time myself, but it was somewhere between 1 and 2 hours that it took me just to undo the bind off. And then it came time to, okay, finally got all these stitches back on the needle. Now I need to bind off again. So I decided to go with my Lucy's Modified Conventional bind off, since I knew that it was probably going to not be too tight because it's worked for me in the past. And I went up a needle size. I usually don't. I find with the Modified Conventional bind off that I don't need to go up a needle size, but this time I wanted to make absolutely sure that there was plenty of stretch on this bind off. And so I went up a needle size, used Lucy's Modified Conventional bind off, finished the bind off, went back to the bathroom, put it over my head, and lo and behold, it fit over my shoulders. Yay! So it was worth it in the end. But, oh man, that was hard. That was really, really hard. But I did it. It is done. Actually, it still needs to be blocked, so it's not completely done. But the hard part is done. Yay! So now I am on the very final project of this book. And all of the rest of the projects are cowls, but this one is a shawl. And I am knitting this one out of lace weight yarn. Hey, it's another lace weight shawl. But I learned from my experience with the Elizabeth shawl that I want to use a smaller needle size on lace weight yarn. And so I am using, you know, I need to look and see if these are 2s or 2.5s, but I'm using a smaller needle size, definitely not 4s. And I am much happier with my fabric, especially since there is a lot of stockinette here. The stitches are much closer together, more straight and aligned. Really like that a lot better. And so this is my progress so far on the shawl. And can you see? I'm using beads. Actually, can you see that? The beads are green that are really close green to the shawl, the yarn color. So, which is what I wanted. I wanted them to blend in rather than sticking out. So hopefully you can see there are actually beads on there. It's been a while since I've done a beaded project and forgot how much fun it can be. Need to add beads more often. So anyway, so here is my progress so far on this shawl. And once this shawl is finished, then I will be able to finalize all the final details of the patterns, send them to my tech editor, and then I will be looking for test knitters. It will probably take me, maybe, I would love to get this done by the end of February, we'll see. It is my focus, so hopefully it will actually get done. So I'm not sure exactly on a timeline, but I will be looking for test knitters. Probably in the next month or two. So kind of keep that in mind if you might be interested in doing some test knitting for this book. Not just this pattern, all of the patterns in the book I will need test knitters for. So, and the best way to do that is to go to my Ravelry group. So the Karen Dawn Designs / Roundtable Yarns Ravelry group, and make sure that you are a member of that group, because that's where I do all my test knits. Anyway, this yarn is my new lace weight yarn that I'm introducing. It is a blend of BFL, Blue Face Leicester, and silk. So it's really nice to knit with. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. And that is something that will be going out in the Yarn Club. So Yarn Club members will be getting this yarn, and then I will have some of it available at DFW Fiberfest as well. It is kind of my supplier has limited quantities of this yarn because it's BFL. The BFL is not as plentiful as like the merino. So because my supplier has limited quantities, I will have limited quantities. Plus, to be honest, it's pretty expensive yarn. So yeah, I'm excited to be adding it to the lineup, and I'm really enjoying using it in this shawl. And that is a little bit of some sneak peeks of some of the things in the book, and kind of progress on what I have been working on. And like I said, make sure you are signed up for my newsletter so that next week on Tuesday, when you get the newsletter, you can see the actual name of the book and the theme that is tying all of these projects together. So there's no stashing, no spinning, no what I finished, no what I'm reading or watching, because I really don't have much to report there. So that really is the bulk of the episode. So I really appreciate that you spend a little time in your day with me, listening to me talk about all things knitting and fiber related, and a little bit of geekery fandom in there. And I really appreciate that you continue to come back and watch the podcast. If you are a returning viewer, if you are a first-time viewer, I hope you will continue to watch and come back in 2 weeks for the next episode. If you have been enjoying the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a review. If you watch this, especially on iTunes, leaving a review there would be really awesome. If you have not already subscribed to the podcast, whether that be on iTunes or on YouTube, which are the two main places to get it, please go ahead and subscribe. That way you'll always know when a new episode pops up and you will be able to watch it. And then if you go to tshirtsandshalls.com, you can see the show notes for each episode and get links to all of the things that I talk about. And then go to the Ravelry group for the podcast, T-Shirts and Shawls Ravelry group, and that is the place to discuss any of the episodes. If you want to participate in the knit along, definitely encourage you to come do that. Or if you just want to chat with a fiber community, whether it's if it's not about the specific episode or the knit along, there is just a general chat thread. So you can definitely come in and chat. So I definitely encourage you to come to the group and talk about the episode or just knitting in general, what you're working on. I would love to hear what you guys are working on, what you're watching and reading, any awesome t-shirts or shawls that you've found recently, or even that you want to share. Maybe there's a shawl that you knit a couple of years ago that you want to talk about. I'd love to hear about it. And the podcast group on Ravelry is probably the best place to go to do that. So please feel free to come share. Like I said, I will link to everything in the show notes. So tshirtsandshalls.com is where you will find the show notes and the links. So I hope to see you on the Ravelry group, and I will be back in 2 weeks with more things fiber related. Thanks, and happy knitting!